Oh, hello.
Hi there.
I'm sorry for letting you in 3 minutes late. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot
No
my
problem.
lipstick. And I was like, oh, where is it? And now I'm here.
No problem at all. How are you?
Doing good, a little sleepy, but see, I'm here, awake and ready.
Thank you for accommodating my time difference.
Of course, you're in the UK right now, right?
Yeah.
Are you there for business or are you just like, oh, I want to visit,
No, my
keep.
daughter lives here. My daughter lives here, so I'm here to see her, and then also I have a little bit of business related stuff to do here too. A
And by
little
your
bit, but
business,
yeah,
animation, TV, I want to be in that business and I'm trying right now.
yeah.
So one request before we start, is it possible to blur the background? Because it's just a little bit like a little disorienting. So without it is like better if
Can do. Let me see. There, how's that?
nice. See your hotel looks nice, so it gives like a little good vibe.
Oh, good. There we go. Put myself in the center of the frame.
Yeah. See, you
There.
got the whole composition. I just did whatever. I put three posters and I called it a day. So and then plus selfies. I already have them. Makes me kind of look like a child, but it's okay because I'm a child at heart.
I like it. I think it looks good.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just gonna be like a conversation, just like we're having right now. And my little like I just have an intro and an outro, but I don't know why it's pitch black. So I think I memorized it. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Okay, so just to make sure, your name is pronounced Philip Stamp, right? Like
Yes, correct. Yeah.
I'm so smart. I have great memory. Okay. Okay, so I'll count down from three and just make sure we are recording. And I hope I don't sound too crusty. I'm a little congested, but
You sound
I
okay.
never, I never should have said that. Then you would never like
Yeah, no,
get.
no, you sound fine.
Okay, so I'll count down from three and we go. Three, two, one. Welcome to Podcast for Fun. This is a show where we dive into the passion, the process, and the journeys of creative storytellers as they bring their stories to life. I am your host, Sophia, and today we are joined by a talented creative director, Phillip Stamp. Thank you so much for being here, Philip.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Sure. So basically, I started working in the animation industry in the early 90s. And it was at a time, when I there weren't nearly as many animation studios or things around at that time. And so it was actually kind of even a surprise to me, that it was even a career that I could choose and go towards. It was something that just seemed very almost far-fetched to me because, having grown up watching lots of cartoons and animated feature films and things like that. And throughout the the 80s, which was my teenage years, was really kind of the golden age of the start of sort of the golden age of the Disney animated feature films, right? Like things like Little
Mm,
Mermaid and things like that sort of came out, and early 90s, like 92 was Beauty and the Beast. And so it just seemed like a time when it was something that was really on the rise, and drawing was always my passion. Drawing and storytelling, drawing and writing were really my two passions. And so yeah, so I started my career in Ottawa, which at the time in Canada seems sort of like an unlikely place, but it was really just such a wonderful place for animators. There was so much talent there at the time, people that had
mm,
been working for a long time and who were very, very, generous and keen to share their know-how with with a newcomer. So
mm.
yeah, it was, pardon me. Yeah, in the early 90s that I sort of started. And it was also not long after I started, it was a time of a lot of disruption in the industry because Toy Story, the very first Toy Story movie came out, which was the first CG animated feature film. And then not long after that, Reboot the TV series Reboot came out. So it was, CG animation was not just big budget on television or on the feature film big screen. It was also, starting to show up on television. And it was quite disruptive. There was a lot of people who didn't want to adapt to the new technology and things like that, but I was kind of keen. So I was, a fairly early adopter of these new technologies and things like that. And what it kind of led to for me was actually getting away from the animation industry for a while, and working in visual effects because it was very, very similar. A lot of the tools and techniques and skills and things like that used in animation were also being used in visual effects. And of course, having a having a strong visual sense, ability to look at light and composition and things like that. So I spent some time going back and forth between the world of visual effects and the world of animation. And I think it's possible. I mean, only in the last few years did I find out that I have ADHD and some other non-neurotypical things going on, but I think it served me very, very well back then because I was always very, very curious to learn new things. So, from drawing and all of the things there, everything to do from design and storyboards and animating, of course, but then going into the digital space where there was, so many other things you could do and so many other projects that you could work on. And I met so many incredible people doing that.
Mhm.
And, you know, um, from that, and I'll try and sort of condense it a little bit, but I worked around a lot of different types of projects and studios and stuff at the time. And in the sort of early mid 2000s, um, uh, kind of because a little bit because of my visual effects experience and a little bit because of my animation experience, um, I went to work for a big American company, um, which is actually Lucasfilm. So I went to work for Lucasfilm on um, one of the Star Wars prequels. And at that time, they
Mhm.
were creating an animation studio in Southeast Asia to do new animated series. So I had had some experience in starting studios. It was a sort of a thing because I had come from come from a traditional animation background and then adopted CG animation. I sort of knew a little bit what it took to go from one type of production to a different type of
Mhm.
production. So I had helped a few animation studios, mostly in Montreal at the time, make that transition from producing 2D traditional animation into doing CG animation. And so when I went to Singapore in sort of the early mid 2000s, that's what I did with them is I helped set up the animation studio there
Mhm.
and helped sort of establish the workflow and pipeline and everything like that. And one of the sort of nice things, I mean, I still think of myself as an animator, though I haven't really animated in a long, long time, but I do still think of myself as an animator. I'm very happy that sort of the last thing I actually professionally animated was C3PO. So that's kind of my nice thing that sticks in my head. But um, uh, so then from that point, I set up, when I left that company, I set up a new animation studio in Singapore, and I did that for a while. And then in the early 2010s, it was 2012, I came back to Canada and went to work for another Canadian studio as as a VP of animation. So
Mhm.
overseeing bigger and bigger projects. And and then from that was with a company called, at the time it was called DHX Media, which now is called WildBrain. But I
Mhm.
left there, and then the former CEO of DHX Media was setting up a new company called IOM Media, IOM, which stands for the Island of Misfits, which I think is quite appropriate for our group of folks.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was a partner in that as well. And so that sort of takes us up to sort of now, trying to sort of not talk about it too much, but condense it into a little space.
Well, that's what you're here for, to talk as much as you want about your career and
All
like
right, okay.
and stuff. So, what kind of movies did you grow up watching that kind of like motivated you to want to become part of this industry?
Oh, it was less movies than it was television, to be honest.
Mhm.
The type of animation that I grew up watching was mostly the Looney Tunes cartoons. So, the Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Coyote and Roadrunner and those were absolutely, you know, to me, those things were kind of a pinnacle of animation because they were so the comedy in them was so broad. It wasn't like they weren't shows for kids, but as a kid you could watch it and enjoy it. But I used to, particularly with my dad, we
Mhm.
used to watch those and laugh and laugh and laugh. That's sort of a big thing that I remember from being a kid. It was that. But movies that I really, really loved. I mean, a lot of the real classics, and most of the animated movies that I watched when I was a kid were things that were, as a special on television or a special screening. So it was movies like, things like the Aristocats
Mhm.
and Robin Hood and 101 Dalmatians and all those kind of classic Disney things. And then later when I was a teenager, sort of in my teenage years, I really, really started to like a lot of the offerings that were coming from Japan. And I mean, now, of course,
Mhm.
these days the anime is, ubiquitous. It's I would say more popular even than most Western animation. But for me, and I grew up in Newfoundland,
Mhm.
and so it was not exactly like a huge cultural melting pot. It was pretty homogenous for the most part, but every now and again, something would make its way there. And I loved comic books and manga and things like that. And so one of my very, very favorite comic books was a series called Akira. And I remember when I heard that they had made an anime, there was an animated movie.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, lost my mind. I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. So I really got into that, and more anime as, in my teenage years. And then retrospectively sort of started to go back and look at things I had seen when I was a little younger, things like Gatchaman and things like that, that were just really inspirational, but different, right?
Mhm.
You had the Disney animation, which was very character centric, very detailed and fine movement and everything like that. And then anime, which was much more shot composition and dynamic posing and a lot of detail in machinery and things like that, which I really, really liked.
Mhm.
Anything with giant robots kind of thing was something that I really liked. So that was sort of a big source of inspiration for me, was the the Warner Brothers, the classic Warner Brothers for the
Mhm.
comedy, but the anime really tweaked a different thing for me just because of how technical it was and how uh, complex the designs could be. Um, and so, yeah, that was sort of a couple of big sources for me.
Did you watch the latest Demon Slayer movie by any chance?
Demon Slayer, I think I'm 5 episodes into the series, so I have not seen the movie yet. I've been holding off, and and
Mhm.
and I know it's terrible, but I haven't even seen K-pop Demon Hunters yet, which I
Oh
know
my
is just everywhere.
God.
No, I haven't seen it yet. Can't
Oh my
wait.
God.
I'm probably gonna watch it in the next week or so because I'm visiting my daughter, and I've
Mhm.
asked her to watch it with me. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
How do your kids ever watch any of your like shows or like TVs and stuff?
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, my daughter's a bit older now, so most of the stuff that I was making, a lot of the stuff that I had made over the years was more for, very small kids, and that's,
Mhm.
for a long time, certainly throughout most of the 2000s, right up until even just a few years ago, the bulk of animation being produced was really for very young kids. That's sort of
Mhm.
the bulk of it. And so as an artist, as an animator, as I still like to think of myself, uh, making things for very, very small kids, preschool kids, and so on was not really what drove me in terms of passion for storytelling.
Mhm.
But there were two aspects of it that I really, really liked. One is the art of animation. And no matter what, the art of animation is something that I find compelling, no matter who the audience is. If you're
Yeah.
making some, animating characters for grown-ups, you're animating characters for kids, it's still that wonderful, bringing these images to life kind of thing. So certainly I made a lot of stuff for preschool kids and stuff like that. And so when my daughter was much younger, yeah, she watched a lot of the things that I did for sure. As she got older, she would watch it more dutifully, I think, more just
Yeah.
supportively than anything else. But I wouldn't expect somebody to sit and watch, 9.5 hours worth of preschool content when you're 17 years old or 18 years old. It's sort of, not where not the things that are going to interest you. But my daughter absolutely watched, she watched a lot of the stuff that I did for her age, and then,
Mhm.
you know, later in a more supportive capacity.
Hey, you never know. Like people watch Bluey at like th mid in their mid 30s. Like it's just,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
but I feel like
And
those
every
kind of shows are a little more like a little targeted towards adults and kids, you know?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the reasons for the success of Bluey is that it's got that broad appeal. And I go back to, stuff when I was a kid and watched with my dad.
Mhm.
It was, I mean, Bluey is a far cry from Elmer Fudd shooting Daffy Duck in the face with a shotgun, but, but still, it was something that, I watched with my dad. And I think that that's the really lovely thing with Bluey is anybody can really watch it and get something out of it.
I feel speaking of that, I feel like animation these days, at least in Japan, I don't know if you ever watched, you probably did, but I don't know if you watched Dragon Ball Z, that was
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
like kind of like a teenager, like 12 and up. That's what it was intended. But it was very
Yeah,
brutal, as you can tell
yeah.
in today's standards. And then you watch Dragon Ball Super, and then there's a key difference. In Dragon Ball Super, no one breaks their arm, no one like bleeds. But in
Mm,
Dragon Ball, there's a lot of that. So I feel like there's a lot less of the impact. And my assumption is because um the regulations or something became more strict, but I don't understand why, because Dragon Ball Super did way worse than Dragon Ball Z in
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
viewership.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think over the years, there were a lot of different sort of groups that got involved in broadcast standards and practices. If you've ever heard that phrase before, broadcast standards and practices, S&P, as it's usually known.
Mhm.
And, depending on the broadcaster or the distributor, there's always like, what they can and can't show. And oftentimes things are very similar, but there are little outlying things that are different. Um, and violence is one of the big things that they clamp down on a lot. From the 70s and 80s into the 90s and 2000s, just so many more regulations came into play. But what I do find interesting, like for me, like I was saying, when I was, from when I was a kid until I was a teen. When I was a teen, the things that started to tweak my interest were really was really anime, because the stories were not like, suddenly you had these more complex stories. You had
Mhm.
shows like Robotech, or things like that had these huge worlds and this sort of histories behind them, and these sort of complex relationships and things like that. Um, and in addition to that, of course, these fantastic machines and robots and stuff like that, which were all really amazing. But the medium, and it still does, the medium of animation just allows you to tell different kinds of stories. It allows
Yeah.
you to do things in a different way. You can tell a story, that, like a simple love story, but you have it take place in, the far reaches of space, or with one character as a robot or something like that. And things that if you were to do them in live action would be prohibitively expensive, but in animation
Mhm.
you can just make it. So, I think having an exposure to that when I was like 12, 13, 14 was a really, really, really big motivator, inspiration to me.
Like, have you watched Dragon Ball out of curiosity?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you remember that scene? Oh my God. where I think they're like Gohan and not Piccolo, sorry, Krillin are like on planet Namek, and they're like fighting this like Gyu force, and one of the Gyu Force members like kicks Gohan in the head and snaps his neck, and he's like twitching on the ground. I was like so mortified watching it, but it was done so well because like the tension was there, it's slow motion, and you never expect it, and you're like, oh my God, this like little kid's like completely busted up. So I don't know. Personally, I really liked scenes like that because it like left an impression on me. And I think it's like impossible to tell what um can, offend someone or how people take things. So I don't like I maybe it's just me. I feel like it creates a restraint on your creative freedom when you have policies like that that don't allow you to expand your ideas.
I think it certainly can. I think it certainly can. I mean, one thing that it speaks to me, and I say this from having been fortunate enough, and I really say that I've been really, really fortunate enough to work with some really incredible creators
Hmm.
who really have a passion to make things for kids.
Hmm.
And like I said, I mean, I loved it. I loved making shows for kids. But what really was my driving factor was the art of, the art of it and the process of it.
Hmm.
But I worked with some absolutely incredible people who, had psychology degrees in early childhood development and, education degrees for,
Yeah.
teaching young kids and things like that. And so I certainly can be very understanding of where these limits come into place. I think the downside of that has largely been that, and we're all kind of guilty of it, that,
Yeah.
you just sort of let your kid watch whatever, and you just go, well, it's
Hmm.
cartoons, and so they can just sit over there and watch cartoons
Yeah.
without knowing what's on it. And I think because I was in the industry,
Mhm.
uh, when I became a dad, I um, I wanted to make sure that I watched what my kid was watching. I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to be there and see what she was watching and participate in it and all of that. And I think that there are not quite as many. I mean, I know some phenomenal parents who are exactly that, very hands-on. They'll sit there and watch everything, and it's easier when it's a show like Bluey for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but you kind of have to do that. You kind of have to be the parent, right? And just watch what what your kid is watching.
Hmm.
Because if you're gonna, I mean, when you're a creator, you want to be able to create and you want to be able to tell stories. But one thing I'll say though about
Yeah.
that, I'm a big proponent of this, and I have said this on another podcast before, but I'll say it here again. I absolutely feel that restrictions amplify creativity. Like 100%. If you are restricted, uh, your creativity is the only thing that's going to save you. If somebody says to you, okay, I want you to paint me a painting.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what the painting's about. I'm not going to tell you how big it is. I'm not going to tell you what medium to use. I'm not going to tell you if it needs to be digital or oil or watercolor or you know, pastels. I just want a painting. It can be as big or as small or as colorful or not as you like. Well, as a creator, you're going to get frozen. You're going to go, well, now I have a bunch of decisions that I have to make. Now I have to do a bunch of stuff. But if I said, I want you to do me a drawing and I have a pencil and a piece of paper, well, then I have a pencil and piece of paper. It still
Yeah.
doesn't restrict, there's zero restriction to what you're going to draw, zero restriction to the image you're going to make. You can do anything you want. You can do a stick
Hmm.
man, or you can, do the Sistine Chapel in HB. But
Hmm.
um, uh, you have those parameters, and I'm a firm believer as a creator and as a person who has had to supervise teams of artists and creators, that the more you set parameters, the easier it is for the creative people to work with.
Yeah.
And really, really creative people then can absolutely shine then, because you're just like, I don't need you to think about, you don't need to make these choices. You just need to do this. And there you go. And because I genuinely believe that when you are a truly creative person, there are no boundaries, right? You can set all the boundaries you like, and if you're a really creative person, they'll just simply go away. So yeah,
No,
so I mean, making shows and stuff like that for that audience. Um, One of the things I know that drives it, like anything else, when you're talking about something as a business or as an industry,
yeah,
um, is who's going to buy it, right? Is there somebody who's going to pay for it? And if you're going to do it out of your own pocket, you're going to make something and you're going to fund it, whether it's because you're lucky enough to not have to pay rent or buy groceries or anything like that. Then you can kind of do anything you want. But if you need to get somebody to give you the money up front in order to, pay for it,
yeah,
well, then you have to talk to somebody about, well, what is the thing that you want, right? And usually the way that has been over the years has been, you'd go to a broadcaster, somebody like, you know, in Canada, you'd go to somebody like the CBC, or back in the day, you'd go to like YTV or something, and they would say, oh, we have a slot at 3:30 p.m. where we need a show for kids between the age of 8 to 12. So you go,
yeah,
okay, I need to find an idea that's going to be suitable for kids 8 to 12. And then you look at the broadcast standards and practices that say you can't have somebody kicking somebody in the face, or you can't have somebody smoking cigarettes or whatever. And so then that's where all of the restrictions really come in. So to that point, what I've done over the years is to say, okay, well, what is the core thing as an artist and as a creator? What are the core things that I love? If I have to work within these restrictions, if I have to work within the restrictions of not being able to, minimizing or completely eliminating violence, like how can I tell a story with tension and with stakes if I can't show risk?
yeah.
If I can't show consequences, like if nobody's going to get hurt, then there's no real risk. It's just there's nothing matters. So you have to find other ways to operate in that space. Number one, and number two, like the thing that the passionate parts for me, like I said, are the actual art of animation, the actual motion, the movement, the being able to get a two-dimensional, and it doesn't matter if you're making CG animation or traditional
Mhm.
2D animation. Ultimately, you're talking about a two-dimensional image. And to string together a series of images that's going to make somebody laugh or cry, uh, wow, how amazing is that, right?
Yeah.
So, to that end, to me, it largely hasn't, having those restrictions really hasn't really bothered me. Though when I want to make something for myself, it's different.
Okay, what kind of stuff do you make for yourself then? Kind of curious.
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of science fiction and a big fan of fantasy genre, and I like adventure stories and things like that. So when I'm, writing things for myself or doodling concepts or things like that, and I have also worked on a couple of projects, uh, in professional capacity that were in that way. Then, those are the types of stories that's where my brain usually goes, into some form of adventure type, action adventure type thing. That's kind of, you know, the space I think that I like. And, when I go back to things that inspired me when I was younger, I
Mhm.
think about anime, and I think about, movies like Akira, or shows like Robotech. Um, then it's like cool technology or magic or something that's just got a little bit extra beyond what we can see in reality, which is also an opportunity for animation to shine, because you just get wonderful designs of costumes and vehicles and monsters and creatures and things that don't exist in reality, but you can create them. So yeah, kind of that's what I like to do for, when it's me.
That's that's why anime characters have such like crazy hair, because you can never do that
Yeah,
in
yeah,
like Goku
yeah,
spikes.
yeah,
That's never gonna happen. I saw some people doing like wig things at cosplays, and I was so impressed. I'm like, this is so hard. Like they like shape it, and when I asked how they do it, they're like, oh my God, they use like polymer to put it inside, so it doesn't look like it's there. There's hair
yeah.
on top. So crazy.
Yeah,
So,
it is. I've seen some people doing that. I've never seen anyone. Oh no, that's not true. I did see a Goku a couple of years ago of somebody that had and spiky hair, and it was just kind of incredible. But some of these cosplay people are just so creative and talented in their, you know, how they find materials that can recreate, these styles, but in reality, it's just kind of amazing.
I think it's also a good example, like being impressive under like creative restraints. Because you're like, okay, I have to do this specific character and I have to do this specific hair. How do I make that happen? Make it look good in real life? And
That's
boom.
yeah. Yeah. Well, because right? Like it has to look like this. Like I have an image and I have to take something that looks like
Mhm.
hair, but make it look like that. So yeah, no, I mean you're very, very restricted in terms of that. You have something that you have to specifically achieve. And then also,
Mhm.
like time, like a lot of people in the cosplay space are like, that's like they'll have like a few months to put something together, which seems like a lot of time. But then when you look at the amount of work that goes into it, it's like, wow, you're spending all of your, like every minute of your free time putting these things together. So
I find it like really interesting and impressive that like these kind of like movies and stories affect people like so strongly that they have a career out of like becoming the characters in those stories, which is like so cool and kind of crazy
yeah,
to me. And like the
yeah,
beauty of
yeah,
social media, anything that people watch can become a job. And that includes
yes,
dressing up as anime characters, I guess.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Why do you think that storytelling is like, so powerful in people? Like I wonder why, because I never really thought deeply about it.
Well, I mean, to be honest, what I think it is it's a way for us to communicate how to be a human. I think it's a way for us to communicate how to be, how to get through this life, how to get through this world, how to get through all of the challenges that we encounter. And you tell a story about it. You tell a story about, oh, I did this thing and this was that, or but I mean, even more powerful is when you're like,
Mhm.
oh no, there was this other person who was this incredible person, character who did these amazing things, and you relate to them, you resonate with them. You can watch stories that seem to be about any kind of character that can be, animated cats or dogs or whatever, but you watch it and you go, no, 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 that's me. Like
Mhm.
that's me. That I see myself in that. And so when you start to see yourself in these other characters, and then you see these other characters having problems and how they deal with the problems, and you go, oh no, I wouldn't do that. Or, oh no, I see why you did that. Oh no, that was exactly the right thing to do. Oh, so I think is storytelling. I don't know this for a fact.
Mhm.
Um, but I believe it is one, well, it's definitely one of, if not our oldest as a species art form, um, because it's, everything from sharing with, friends around a fire, where to go and get water and where to go and get the, berries or fruits or hunt whatever. You tell a story about it. Um, and you listen to the stories because you go, oh, if I go and do that, I might encounter these things, and how did this person deal with these things? So, you hear sometimes about stories need to resonate and be true.
Mhm.
And that's really what it is. It has to have some kind of, you know, relationship to a real human experience. And it was funny. I was listening to an interview with Sylvester Stallone. It was an old interview with
Mhm.
Sylvester Stallone, and he was talking about his very first film, which was Rocky, and how for him, Rocky was an allegory to his acting career,
Mhm.
about how he was trying and trying and trying and encountering all kinds of obstacles and, things that kept knocking him down, and struggling to get back up, uh and so he decided he would write his own movie, and he would try and do this on his own. And of course, in the story of Rocky, in the first Rocky, he doesn't actually win. He loses. He gets the crap kicked out of him in the ring by the character Apollo Creed. But he wins emotionally because for him, simply being in the fight was the victory. Simply getting to that point and being there was the victory. And so he, as a character, set his own victory standards, just like Sylvester Stallone in real life set the parameters for his own victory of making this movie to begin with. So that movie wound up, as simplistic as that film was, is beautiful and incredible in terms of how it could resonate with people. Who doesn't resonate with that about wanting to do something and having obstacles and getting knocked down and having trouble getting back up? Anyone can relate to that. And to know that he's talking about his acting career, but the boxing was sort of allegorical to it. It doesn't really matter what it's about, right? It doesn't really
Mhm.
matter that it's a boxer story. It could relate to somebody who wants to be, you know, a vet, or somebody who wants to be a musician, or somebody who wants to be whatever. So yeah, that's to me, it's absolutely magical, and it's magical as well in storytelling that you can put pictures in people's heads that make them feel something.
Mhm.
And you know, I mean, what's truly magic, I feel, is actually just the words. If you can make somebody feel something with just the words, and I think for my career anyway, over the years, I've sort of backed away a lot from the drawing aspects of it and delved much more into the writing aspect of it,
Mhm.
because the writing is really the the spark that gets all the other artists interested, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're a designer or like a storyboard artist, let alone an animator, until you read the script, there isn't anything there. But then you read the words and you go, oh, okay, now I'm going to do a thing. And what you as a designer do might not be the same thing that was in the head of the person who wrote the words.
Mhm.
And so when you are the person who writes the words and you give it to somebody else and they turn it into a thing, you're like, oh wow, that's so great, right? Then it becomes theirs and they pass it on, and then it becomes someone else's and they pass it on, it becomes somebody else's. And it's just it you know, that's when it becomes really, really interesting for me, when everybody sort of takes an ownership of a piece of it. Um, and I heard another director recently, I don't remember who it was, but talking about, the director needing to be the taskmaster, needing to be the one that's like, no, everybody has to do exactly what I want.
Yeah.
And another director saying, I want people to do what they want. I'm going to tell them my thing and then pass it to them, and then they're going to bring their part of it to the table. And what I've found as well over the years is, especially when you have a team of animators,
Mhm.
that you start to see the individual animators in their work. You can look at a shot and go, oh, I know who did that because of how the character tilted their head, or how the character smiled, or how they gestured with their hand, or how they responded to something. And to me, that just makes it more real. That makes it more true, which is
Mhm.
really what you're trying to get when you're telling stories, right? So, yeah.
My favorite part when I'm writing, well, while I'm like making, let's say when I'm making this comic, right? My favorite part is when I'm writing the script and I'm doing the storyboard, because I feel like that's the part where, okay, to me, writing the story is like coming up with the idea, and you try to like put it into words as emotional as possible. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, if someone like storyboarded that, like let's say like a whole paragraph of emotion into like 3 panels, it's not gonna feel like much. So I want to be able to also uh express how it should look visually, because there's like the build up, the tension, and if you add it onto screen, it's also like the music and stuff. So I like to do, at least with comics, like it ends at the storyboard until, and then that kind of becomes a Bible, and then you give it to some artist, and then they like make it more refined, or help
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you render it. So yeah, I love storyboarding. I feel like I'm watching a movie in my head and I'm just like putting it onto the paper. That's how I would describe it.
I totally agree with you. I work that way as well. Uh, to me, when you're the storyteller, when the story is coming from you,
Mhm.
if you're writing the words or drawing the pictures, if you're the one that the story is coming from, and you choose to draw it as pictures and not type it or write it as words, it's the same thing. I find
Yeah.
it's really as a creator, it's really kind of the same thing because you're trying to take what's in your head and put it out there to show somebody else. And uh yeah, I mean, I just think that's magic. I really do. I think it's magic to do that. And like storyboards as well, especially. And I worked as a storyboard artist for quite a while. It was sort of my
Mhm.
main gig for a while. And uh it was and still is actually something that I really, really love to do. It is really getting to tell that, like, as the storyboard artist, you're the one that really is where the sort of the rubber meets the road. Like, it's the first time with pictures you get to show your story to somebody. Um, yeah, I would say it's almost the same for me as writing if it's coming from me. It's different if somebody gives me a script and then I have to storyboard it, or
Yeah.
if you're a storyboard artist and you're not the one who's the originator of the story. It's just, you are then taking somebody else's idea and doing your version of it. You still bring yourself to it, and you still come up
Yeah.
with ideas, and you still, might have camera angles and shots that tell the story in a specific way, but the story is
Yeah.
kind of already there. But if there is no story there and you're choosing to use storyboards or comic book panels as your way of telling the story, then yeah, it's that same sort of creative process of getting, being the one who's telling the story first.
It's kind of interesting that you made like kids shows for most of your career, even though your like inspiration was like kind of mature stories, right? Have you ever actually produced anything that was like completely your idea that was more like, you know, targeted for like teens or something, like kind of like Akira?
I've done a few things like that for sure. I did a music video a couple of years ago. That was something that was kind of different. It was sort of sci-fi and fun, and there was like cars
Oh,
and stuff like that. Um and certainly, I worked on other projects that were not kids shows, both in
yeah.
terms of working on visual effects and animation. I've done a few of those things. Um, but it's like I said, it's challenging
Hmm.
when you want to make something and you are trying to put it out there in the world, in a way that you can earn a living from it, you
Yeah.
know?
I feel that's so hard.
Yeah. And things are really like right now.
Hmm.
I mean, I talked about when I was younger and sort of when I was starting out, and how CG animation was a massive disruptor. And at that time, I mean, I remember colleagues at the time, people I had known who had been working in animation for like 20 plus years, who were going, "Oh, I'm not going to adopt this new technology. I'm just going to keep doing
Yeah.
things the way I've always done it." And within a couple of years, they just were out of the business. They just, they couldn't keep up because the technology just overran them.
Hmm.
And the technology absolutely replaced a bunch of jobs. I mean, the first animation, I remember I was working at this studio in Ottawa. It doesn't exist anymore. It was a place called
Yeah.
Hinton. And I remember going in there for the first time, and there was this big room with about like 50 people in it, and everybody had like white gloves on, and they had a set of tray of paints and little paintbrushes, and everybody was hand painting cells. I'm sure you've seen, like, the old
Yeah.
hand painted cells. So like a whole room full of people hand painting these cells. And then a couple of years ago, this company came out that did it all digitally, and it replaced, a room full of 50 people with paintbrushes was replaced by a room with two people and a couple of computers. And so there was like suddenly those jobs weren't there anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time people going, "Oh, well, you know, it's people, the animation industry is losing a ton of jobs." But what wound up happening was the opposite, that there was way more animation being made. So yes, there weren't the same number of people in rooms doing, mindless kind of paint by numbers type
Hmm.
work, but there were way more jobs for animators and storyboard artists and scriptwriters and designers and editors and compositors and all kinds of, camera people. There was
Yeah.
just so much more work out there
Yeah.
that it way outstripped the number of jobs that were created well outstripped the number of jobs that were lost at the time. And so
Yeah.
now we're in this other weird period with obviously AI and things like that. And it's difficult. It's a difficult time. There are a lot of people in this industry who are out of work, like a lot. It's a very, very difficult time to sort of try and get into this industry when you have people out there that have decades of experience who don't have jobs anymore. But at the same time, there are options and opportunities there for people using these new tools to be able to be storytellers and to be able to get things out there and to be able to sort of go like, um, you know, I have a story that I want to tell, and it's 5 minutes long, and it's this and that, and at one time it would have cost like $500,000, and I would have needed like 60 or 80 people to working their asses off for weeks at a time. Or now you can maybe go, well, I know now I only need like maybe 5 or 6 people, and I can, put this together. So, I don't think we've seen quite yet where this technology is going to go.
Yeah.
But I feel like, uh, I choose to remain optimistic because I have to. That I think that there will be lots of things coming out over the next little while that we see that, that young creators and people who are really motivated are going to want to do. And so like shows like oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the series I just started watching the other day,
Hmm.
but was this show on YouTube, and was made by a very small group of people, and people that were just like, nope, we're just going to make this and put it out there and see. Or things like Has Been Hotel, for example, which was started off by just a few people, and they were like, this is the story that we want to tell. And of course they didn't have any broadcast standards and practices, so swearing was fine, and violence was like, they just did whatever they wanted. They had a story
Yeah.
they wanted to tell, and they knew how they wanted to tell it, and that's how they did it, which
Hmm.
is phenomenal. So uh and like, but going back to your other question about things that I would like to do for an older audience, I will say,
Hmm.
um and it was, like I mentioned, a music video. I love music, and I would really, really love to do a musical project. I would love to do like and cards on the table. The reason I haven't watched K-pop Demon Hunters is because about 4 years ago,
Hmm.
I had a show that I was developing that was very similar to
Hmm.
K-pop Demon Hunters. It had two pop stars as main characters, and they had superpowers. And I was like, oh, no, somebody's made a similar idea to mine. So I've kind of, part of me is like, I don't want to watch it because I still have hopes that I can, work on my idea, and I don't sort of want it to be influenced. But at the same time, I also kind of, you know, hard to not um be
Discouraged.
enticed by it.
Yeah. No, I relate to that so hard. When people tell me like, "Oh, your story, I feel like I've seen it before." I'm like, "Don't tell me. Stop.
Yeah,
Unique, I swear I didn't mean to like make it similar. Please don't tell me that." At
yeah,
least that's
yeah.
that's still cool though. I would still want to watch that pop star thing. And I love musicals. I think that's how I met, guys. I sang and then
Well, that's how I first saw you, was you were doing karaoke at the festival. I'm trying
Mhm.
to remember what you sang.
I sang Part of Your World from Ariel.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy thing. So
Yeah.
anyways,
And you're an excellent
one
singer.
Thank you so much. I want to become also a musical singer. I have like two dreams and I'm like working towards both of them. So I don't know which one's going to succeed, but hopefully both.
Yeah,
If one
yeah,
succeeds,
yeah.
I'll implement it, you know. If I become a successful musical singer, I'll be like, "Oh, you know, I also make stories." And then if I make become a successful film director, then I'll be like, "Oh, I should make a musical." That's
Yeah,
the
absolutely. And nothing to stop you from doing both if you like, right? Lots of people do more than one thing and do them really well. So,
I
yeah,
have only one life, so I have to try as many things that I want to do. But anyways,
exactly.
I have one final question.
Sure.
What's one advice you give to the aspiring storytellers watching this right now, people who also want to become like you?
Well, that's a tough one. I would have a couple of things to say. I mean, first of all,
Hmm.
I would say that the better you are at working within restrictions,
Hmm.
the more successful you're going to be. The better you are at looking at what you have at
Hmm.
your disposal and like one of the things that I never like to hear anytime I would go to any creative meetings or anytime at the start of a new project, and you'd have a bunch of people that would get together in a room or like a bunch of writers or whatever, and you'd have somebody in charge who would go, okay, I want to think outside the box. And the phrase thinking outside the box always really bothers me because I have a few examples of this.
Hmm.
Um, but the box is your friend because the box might be a pencil and a piece of paper. The box might be a pencil and a piece of paper and 1 hour of time. The
Yeah.
box might be $10 million and 100 people and but you're always going to have limits. No matter what you do, you're going to have limits. You can only be awake for so many hours a day. You only have so much time. And when you can start looking at the resources that you have at your disposal and how you can best utilize them, because again, like, if you want to do something and you might go, well, I'll learn how to do it myself, or I'll do everything myself, but you only have so much time. You might want to ask yourself, well, do I have a friend or do I have a contact or I have somebody that I know who could do this so that I can do something else, right? And that's not thinking outside the box. That's very specifically thinking inside the box. Get to know the box. The box is your friend. That will be my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice I would say is um, really get to know uh, how technology can be your friend. Really, really, really get to know. And by technology, I'm not just saying like AI or Maya or Blender or things like that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about tools, specifically tools that are going to help you get your ideas out there.
Hmm.
Tools that are going to help you show what you want to show, create what you want to create. Um, and as an artist, it's really worth trying lots of different tools and lots of different techniques and finding one that really speaks to you.
Hmm.
The third and final piece of advice I would say is whatever you are inspired by, it's going to be very, very, very hard. Like if you are inspired by, some incredible designer or incredible director, no matter how hard you try, you are never going to be able to do what that person has done. That's not
Yeah.
to say you won't be as good as them. That's not to say you won't be as incredible or as amazing, but your perspective is unique. And so if you are working really, 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 really hard at something and you can't quite get it into that shape or that place that you're trying to get to because you want to be like this other creator, you need to listen to yourself a little bit more and go, well, I'm not going to get there, or I want to make it, I want to make it like that, but I really need to make it a little bit more like what my heart is saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, that would be my advice. Um, that'd be my advice. And don't be scared. Jump in anyway. Like just do it anyway.
Guys, everyone's gonna judge you anyways. That's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah,
impossible. You know, I remember someone was like saying, "Oh, don't judge yourself." I'm like, well, like I think everyone's judging everybody, so just try to be the version of yourself that you want to be, or whatever
yeah,
that is.
absolutely. You do that, you're already ahead of the game, honestly.
You know, and it's so funny that you said, "Oh, you should be in the box," because that's so true. A lot of people for example, if you talk to a lot of creatives, you're like, oh, how did you like finish that thing? Or how did you like get, motivate yourself? And the 90% of the answer I got was like deadlines. Well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
what's one of the blocks, right? They compress you because like, okay, now you have a time constraint.
totally.
You have to finish
Totally.
something by the end of the day. That's the
Yep.
deadline. And then
Yep.
um another thing is like when people are trying to motivate themselves, they like make an outline. An outline becomes a constraint, and then writing words becomes a constraint, and certain characters becomes a constraint. And then the creativity just flourishes the more everything becomes like precise. So I
Yeah.
completely agree with you on that one. I just
Yep.
never thought of
And
it like,
yeah, and as I said, like if you are a very, very creative person, the box is actually going to just dissolve. Like when you start to really get to know the box, it will actually go away. And even if it's a deadline and somebody's like, oh no, it's a hardcore deadline, I have to do this. There's a lovely example
mhm,
that I saw a number of years ago. It was actually a programmer, a computer programmer friend of mine,
mhm,
who I say computer programmer as if it sounds redundant. Like it's not like a programmer, like a broadcast programmer. It's like a coder. Uh, Showed me this thing, which was to me really, I thought really inspirational in terms of how it related to deadlines.
mhm.
And it was like three drawings, three drawings of Spider-Man. And there was one drawing of Spider-Man that was like an hour, and there was
Mhm.
one drawing of Spider-Man that was like 2 minutes, and another drawing of Spider-Man that was like 30
Yes,
seconds,
yes, yeah, yeah, I've seen that
right?
before.
And you look at them, and sure, the 30-second one looks like crap, but it's still Spider-Man. You still look
Yeah.
at it and you go, Spider-Man. And so, if if you've only got 30 seconds, well, then that's what you got to do, right? If that's what you got, then that's what you have to work with. So you just do your best to do Spider-Man in 30 seconds. Um, and the person who knows how to manage that 30 seconds as best they can is the one who's gonna succeed. So, you might look at it and go, well, it's not my best work. But is it your best work with what you had? Is it your best work within the time that you were given?
Yeah.
Because chances are, and I can say this with absolute certainty, as a person who's been in charge of several projects, there are many, many times then I needed a Spider-Man and I only needed the 30-second version of it. And that was all I wanted. And
Mhm.
somebody was late and they delayed and they did all stuff. And I got the 1 hour Spider-Man and it looked great. And I would go, it's great, but it's way more than I needed. I just needed this here. And actually now I, I had something else I wanted you to do that could have taken an hour, but you took an hour to do the thing that I only needed in 30 seconds. And so there's a part of that, again, particularly as a creative, when you are assigned to do something professionally, and you're like, well, I want to, all good artists, I don't care. All good artists, all professional artists want to do the best they can.
Yeah.
Always. It's really hard for you to not do the best you can.
Mhm.
So again, I will say if you get to know your restrictions, like you said, a lot of people you talk to said deadlines, and it's 100% it. It's
Mhm.
100% it. You get motivated by that and you go, right, I'm just going to be the best there is within that span. So, you know, and we're all really hard on ourselves. Artists, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, I think. So, sometimes you got to cut yourself a break,
Mhm.
um, and go, well, you know what? I did my absolute best with what I was given. So, yeah.
I follow the line of my favorite film director was James Cameron. He's my favorite guy. And he always said you need to strive for greatness, not perfection, because perfection is
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Very, very true.
So, Philip, where can our awesome listeners find your work?
Well, I just wrapped up production on a TV series for kids called Weather Hunters. It's
Mhm.
on PBS in the United States. I don't know that it's going to be showing up in Canada or where else it is, but I know it launched recently in the US
Mhm.
on their public broadcasting service. We did many, many episodes. It's a show that teaches kids about climate, which I
Hmm.
think is really good. Other than that, um, at the moment, I have a couple of other projects that I can't talk about, but if you and I chat again in the next few months,
Yeah.
maybe I'll be able to tell you more about those.
Oh my God. Well, it's decided, guys. He's gonna come back again. And we're gonna talk about animation again. Oh, we'll see. We'll
All
see.
right.
Well,
All
that's a
right.
wrap for today's episode of Podcast for Fun. Thank you so much, Philip, for joining us and sharing your incredible insights. I love talking about movies. I don't know if you can tell. I love talking about movies.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise. I come back and we can just talk about our favorite movies if you want.
Yes, let's do that. I have a whole list. Okay. I'm not kidding. I have a whole list. But yeah. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with fellow storytelling enthusiasts. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to explore, you can drop them in the comments or connect with me on any of my social medias at Podcast for Fun. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and we'll see you on the next episode of Podcast for Fun.